How bad do you have to feel to cancel the training if it has ever happened?
And then he got ill. And he was in hotel all the time, and suddenly I was standing there and totally on my own.
Do you maybe have any funny or interesting stories about the trainers?
No, and maybe my words were too hard, but I really wanted to make the point. I just told them, be quiet, enrich the conversations on the table, but don't hijack any conversations and don't show off how much you know.
What tips would you give to people who are just starting their career?
So that means as a product owner, you should be anchored high enough in the company to have at least a chance to really understand why what you're doing is important.
Joining me today is Ralph Jocham from Switzerland. He is professional Scrum trainer with Scrum.org. He's first professional Scrum trainer in Europe. You started as a software engineer in Oracle, then you became a consultant, you were a Scrum Master, Agile coach, came to be professional Scrum trainer. You still, I believe, if this is true, are teaching computer science in a university, and you have also got your own consulting company called Effective Agile. You are the steward for Professional Scrum Product Owner course in Scrum.org. Bunch of other tokens on your wall, I would assume. You are also the book co-author for the Professional Product Owner Professional Scrum series, and a husband and the father of two beautiful girls. So welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for Bogdan. Thanks for having me, and thanks for the brilliant summary of my achievements. Let's put it this way.
If there are any blank spaces left, any gaps you feel might be relevant to add to your background,
maybe
please
it's
do
just
so.
A quick summary, like so, really in a nutshell. So by training, I'm a computer science, kind of a software engineer. I studied computer science in '97. I started off as a programmer, C, C++, then added Java, as you mentioned. And I came to Agile through extreme programming. So in early 2000, I read the book from Kent Beck, Embrace Change, Extreme Programming. And I kind of changed my mindset away from the unified process, which I had put my teeth in at that point. Originally, I'm from Germany, and I was working there on several projects. And what I learned on early on is that it's not all about technology. It's not about having the right requirements. You couldn't fulfill the requirements technically well done, but you still have unhappy customers. And that's what I kind of realized early on, that there is something wrong. And regardless of how well you program, if the customer isn't happy, it doesn't help. And I like the unified process in that regard because it had the use case thinking instead of the system shell. You thought about an actor and how this person or system interacts with another system, and that gave you lots of context in order to improve kind of the final experience, the final outcome. And yeah, after those 2 gigs in Germany, I moved to England. I worked there for Oracle. And this is then when I also set up my first continuous integration system. It was then called Cruise Control. This was when probably not really anyone knew what continuous integration actually is. And then in 2001, I think I ran into Scrum, because I suddenly also realized if you work really well on a team level, have all of this going, it's still there's a little bit of a disconnect to the outside around that team. And that's when I realized that, basically discovered Scrum. And then I basically put my teeth into Scrum with the first book of Ken Schwaber, which I don't really remember the title anymore. The only thing I remember is that on the cover there is colors written like red and yellow and green and blue, and it's confusing. You look at the cover and it kind of messes you up. That's the only thing I remember. But this was my first contact with Scrum.
Thanks for filling in the gaps. Agile Project Management with Scrum by Ken Schwaber. The first book that comes was the image that you have described in the Google search.
Okay, yeah.
Well, the design is quite ugly, but I guess the contents make up for it.
If you look into the book, like the images, they look like hand drawn or like photocopied 100 times, but the content was good, or it's still good.
How do you manage to be the father and the husband, to have your own consulting company, to teach full time? Because I know that your schedule, at least before the pandemic, was pretty tight and you had to travel a lot, plus you had to teach in the university. Do you have a schedule? How far ahead does it run, or it all just happens?
All of the former. So now with my teaching at the university is that I'm doing an agile living case for medical technique master students, which is always November, December. It's a couple of lectures, which is not too much. I did it for one semester, Introduction to Software Engineering, which basically made my life really hard because it was like 2 days, 3 days a week, which I had to block for other things. So kind of traveling around that kind of, but I only stepped in for someone I knew who kind of is teaching there, and I needed someone because she went on to maternity leave. But now also with the trainings, I'm not sure if this is something to be proud of, but I'm one of the trainers who teaches the most, I think. So in average, I have between 65 and 75 trainings a year. This 2020 will be a little bit less, but I still think it's around 60, I guess. So that means there's every week 1 or 2 trainings essentially, and that would be without vacation or anything else in between. I think well, my daughters, it sounds like I have toddlers at home. No, they are really grown up. They're 17 and 19, so they are pretty much kind of are now looking for universities and other things what they could do after school. Well, and then I have my wife, which kind of helps me to keep my back office running, the taxes being paid, not doing something illegal with my company and things like that. So it's kind of I think it's overall it's more or less I'm the face of it, but it's a team effort.
Yeah, nice way to put it. 1 or 2 trainings, which means 2, possibly 5 days of the week are taken by the professional Scrum trainings. Do you even have time for celebrating holidays or going on a sick leave or doing something? How bad do you have to feel to cancel the training, if it has ever happened?
I have never missed a training. I've been on trainings running a fever. With enough medication, I made it happen, which I'm not sure I would do anymore because the current situation, but this was like my first 2 years when I had my business. I didn't have a sick leave in 5 years or something like that. It's in your head somehow, but when in the beginning you start off your business, you're really concerned about what happens, and now sometimes you just realize things still go on, and right now I wouldn't feel comfortable canceling a training because you still let people down. Virtual trainings would be easier, but if you now think about you do a training, I think we met in Athens, so maybe people have booked their flight, they have booked the hotel and all of that, and then you don't show up. That would be rather disappointing. I had once a situation when I took on a new training, the Professional Scrum with Kanban, and usually before I teach a class, I like to co-teach it a couple of times so that I really know the content and all of that things, kind of good teaching styles as well. And I did one with Daniel Vacanti. He is the steward for the PSK training, and he landed. He's from Florida. He came to Germany so that we can co-teach it there, and then he got ill, and he was in hotel all the time. And suddenly I was standing there and totally on my own. But it went well. It went well.
Well, I can guess that with that level of experience and so many courses and hours, it shouldn't be way too complicated, but the cool story anyway. Next thing I would like to ask you is the experience of becoming a first professional Scrum trainer in Europe. How was process different than I've heard at least a couple of times from your fellow PSTs that it was very close involvement of Ken Schwaber at the time because he was insanely precise which person does he have to get on board next, and very involved in the selection process. Heard many different stories that weird tasks and tests that he had people do to make sure that, okay, this is the right one. Can you shed a bit of light on it and tell how it was?
Sure. But first I need to clarify something. There was one trainer before me, Simon Reindel, in the UK, so I can say continental Europe, I guess. He beat me by, I think, 7 days or something like that. But anyway, so this is going back to 2010. So I became a trainer in March 2010 with Scrum.org. The process takes quite some time. And so as I said, basically I discovered Scrum 2003-ish, something like that. I did my first CSM class with the Scrum Alliance in 2005. And then in 2007-8, I thought about becoming a CST with the Scrum Alliance. And with that, I had been in contact with several trainers there. So they have like a mentor program. So you choose a trainer and you work with that one. And I had Boris Glogger in Germany. I was also in contact with Roman Pichler. So anyway, so we were kind of ironing everything out. And at this point, Ken Schwaber, he blogged about that he wants to have what now is known as the PSD, Professional Scrum for Developers, or the APS Developer. So they renamed PSD to Applying Professional Scrum for Software Development. And at this point, I was still very technical, and I really thought, oh, that's brilliant. And essentially, I just sent an email to Ken and just say, make me part of that. I want to, because I still had so much good professional experience with all of the things involved there. So we started off. At this point, I moved from the US back to Europe. So this is when I basically settled down here in Switzerland. And I was looking for a consulting company, and I was developing with them, together with Ken Schwaber and some other folks then still at the Scrum Alliance, for the Scrum developer training. And then there was this fallout in 2009 between Ken Schwaber and the Scrum Alliance, and then basically Scrum.org was born out of that. And that put me a little bit of an awkward situation. On the one hand, one foot was with the Scrum Alliance becoming a CST for the regular Scrum training, but on the other hand, I was working with Ken and some other folks on the developer training. At some point, I had just to make a judgment call, and I basically kind of cut everything I had done before and then moved over then totally 100% to Scrum.org. And this was for me mostly a personal reason, because Ken is really demanding and he's really straight. I mean, he tells you black and white, there's nothing in between. But he's a really like a good person to work with. And to my experiences with my mentors at the Scrum Alliance weren't that great. So I just decided, okay, sounds good. And basically that's when I joined Scrum.org. This was late 2009. Essentially, I met with Ken. We talked about things. He asked me a couple of questions. And in the end, he was also one of the things he did at Scrum.org first was to come up with an assessment. Because he said, if you want to teach or be proficient to be as a Scrum Master, you have to have a body of knowledge represented, which he tested through this assessment. So we had to pass the assessment at specific scores, and then he gave you feedback and so on. So it was at the beginning a very personal process. Looking backward, it was a little bit stressful because, I mean, you're working with Ken. He's highly respected and everything, and he critiques you here and there. And but overall, I think it was a good, pleasant experience. So there was nothing awkward about it.
So you were there during the fallout.
Yeah. Yes. I remember getting that email. Ken is not at Scrum Alliance anymore. Scrum.org, and it's like, okay, wow, what happened?
Did it come out of the blue, or you were feeling that something is coming? There was some tension you could read in the air?
Well, afterwards, you're always smart. You can just say, sure, I saw it. I probably didn't really see it. What I sensed a little bit was unhappiness of existing trainers. Because if you think about it, you have one Scrum Master and up to 9 developers. Now, if there is a Scrum training for developers, that means that your business could be cut quite significantly. And I think this was one of the concerns which were there. But this is just my interpretation of the situation. So again, this is now 10, 11 years ago. If you think about it, the Scrum Alliance existed for 6 years before that happened, and this is now 12 years ago. So it's kind of now for the majority of times, both of them have existed. I think competition is good. So in that regard, I think the overall global Scrum community has benefited from that separation.
Were there many people that went to Scrum.org together with Ken?
I don't think so. I know of 2, maybe 3 PSDs who used to be a CST. Not too many, I think. I mean, the ones who were already a CST, they had a good position, they were established, so why would they want to change?
Yeah, fair point. They had more to lose than you that haven't already made the last step.
Exactly, yeah.
How involved were you in expanding the PST network in Europe? Because you're the steward for PSPO course, and I assume dozens of candidates has gone through your hands over the years. When did you become a steward, and was the selection process any different before stewards existed and right now?
So maybe a little bit about how the steward program was created. So Don McGrill, so my co-author, and myself, we both became the first stewards at Scrum.org in 2016. Um, and uh, and there was a fallout because we both were at Agile 2015 conference, and so we knew before by email, but this is the first time we met in person. And we just, I think it was on day one at the conference, we sat down at the bar, had a drink, and we just chatted about the product owner training and how we like it and how great it is and how important it is. But then we also talked about, how do you teach this? How do you teach that? Because sometimes some things were a little bit like rough or strange, and sometimes the order was changed of learning objectives and things. So we just basically took out our laptops at the bar and we started, hey, how about doing this exercise like that, and so on. And the good thing is there were other people around us as well who kind of PSTs and so on. And so we just involved them, asked them questions. Do you think like this is better, that is better? And we made fairly good progress. And at some point we just said, no, let's do that. Let's finish up. Let's create the training as how we would like to teach it. And we honestly thought that we can do that in those 5 days or 4 days remaining. And we couldn't. So we were like, suddenly it was Friday and we only had done half the work. So then we went back and just say, should we throw it away? No, it's too good. It's too valuable. And we kept on working on that. And I think we were then done by September, October. And then we went with that back to Scrum.org and involved Ken and some other people there and just saying, you know what, this is what we think about the training. This is how we think it should be. And by the way, we two created it together, like with an open source mind. So we went into GitHub, we looked at all the issues which were in there. We talked to a lot of people. We brought in our ideas. So how about we do something like that for all of our trainings, that we have like stewards who maintain that, but they tap the community. This was okay. There was a little bit of going forward and backward, because in the past there was not too many releases per training, and sometimes something was kind of stale for some time, and if there was a issue in there, so it wasn't frequent delivery as we often advocate anyway. So we got the yes in January, and then we were kind of the first stewards. And why I'm still a steward like 5 years later is a little bit of because we started off early, and kind of I was supposed to roll off in May last year. But then COVID came in between and kind of reshuffled everything. So right now is kind of my last month, maybe next 1 or 2 months as a steward, and then someone else will take over, which is a good thing, I guess, because at that point you bring in new ideas, new techniques, new and other things. So I'm looking forward to what the next stewards then will be doing. It's a fairly transparent process, and that's something I really like at Scrum.org. So even becoming a trainer, anything like that is very, very transparent. So it's not like at the Vatican where they burn smoke and it's whether it's white or black, what happened. People can apply. They have to fill out a questionnaire about certain things, experiences, and so on. And then we go through that. And then everyone who applies gets an interview. So it's not that we just say, out of those, because for the product owner training, we had don't let me know, like 18 applications. So that's 18 interviews you have to do, and going forward and backwards. So that took also some time. It took us about 3 months, because I mean, Charles Shosik, who is now the second steward after Don rolled off about a year ago, he's based in, I think, Columbus, Ohio, if I'm not mistaken. Time zones and all of these things make it harder. But once you have that, we go through that, we have conversations, we assess, and then at the point it's like, usually some applications are very obvious and some aren't, so, and it's kind of, at the end you have to make a judgment call anyway. You know, we had people who tried it the first time and that tried it for another training maybe a year later, and then suddenly they became stewards. So it's not that once you have been not chosen, I don't want to say denied, but not chosen, there's always an open door for another term, for another training, or even the same training. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's a very good thing that I also like with Scrum.org, the culture of, we are happy to have you here and we are not rejecting you, but we are making sure that you have all the qualities needed by the time you get accepted. It's like not yet. It's not the no, it's a not yet, which is really helpful mindset when you go through the professional Scrum training preparations and the exams and the peer reviews. That can go either way, and it can leave you with some unpleasant experiences. But in the end of the day, if you just inspect and adapt, God, this is so cliche, but in reality it is. So you try to become better, and then things get through.
Yeah, that's also with the trainer. So when I run a class where there are future trainers for the PSPO training are in there, it's the same thing. You know, you provide them with feedback, you talk to them. I mean, you have gone through this as well, and it's, you know, some of them it's like, oh, great, perfect, yeah, you get my approval, and it's not just my approval. I can't make a person succeed or not succeed. I'm just one piece of the whole puzzle, essentially, because then there's assessment scores which are being looked at, then there is a peer review with other stewards, and so on and so on. And all of this basically has to fit together and give a thumbs up. And if one of those feedback is not yet, well, that's what the person gets told. Not yet here for these and these reasons. So if you work on that, please come back. We would like to give you another chance.
Just as you put it, two bits that we haven't touched in terms of my previous questions. Could you try to recall how many folks roughly went through you over the 5 years, for 4 years, I don't know, 4.5 years of your stewardship with the PSPO?
I would have to look up my documents and everything, but I would say it's probably 20 in a year. So maybe a little bit less, 20, that would make it like 100, probably something like that. And I think this is too many. Maybe 80. I think 80 would be a number I'll feel comfortable putting my name underneath. Yeah.
And which qualities are you looking for in the candidates that apply?
So I would say the majority of people becoming a PSPO trainer are already PSM trainers. So they are kind of they are PSTs, professional scrum trainers with scrum.org. Now the PSPO is something which we started doing about 2.5, maybe 3 years ago. We just, you know what, there's some people out there, they're really good product people. They have built their own product and been everything. And maybe they're not so strong in Scrum, but they're even stronger on the product side. Shouldn't we give them direct access to become a trainer for this as well? So that's kind of, these people I need to be handled different than already PSTs, because if someone is there as a PST already, we know this person knows how to teach, how to talk about Scrum, how to talk about the answer questions, correct language and things like that. This is all checked off. Now for the already existing PSTs, what I'm looking for is an entrepreneurial mindset. Now, I want to feel comfortable that if you would come up with a business idea, that you would have a high chance because you use the well understood approaches and techniques we have these days to make it successful. You might still fail. I mean, this is the rule of the game essentially, but at least you would be very entrepreneurial about how you go about that. Now, for the people who are coming directly without being a PhD before and into the PSPO trainer fold, for them it's the other way around. Usually, these are really strong people from an entrepreneurial mindset, and it's sometimes really amazing what they have done in the past. It's like, wow, this is great. They lack Scrum knowledge often. They talk about things in a way which is not. This is not the Scrum language we're looking for. So you need to look out for different things, slightly different. But overall, usually if I have a train-the-trainer training, that's many T's in a row. But if I have a train-the-trainer training, it's a mixture of both, and they can benefit from each other even in class. I mean, in person it's easier than now virtual, but overall, I think it's for either side a good experience.
Do you maybe have any funny or interesting stories about the trainers? Because it's kind of a unique and different experience compared to the professional Scrum trainings, because you are basically 1v1 with the person who is hugely experienced and knows the drill very well and can teach, and you just came out of the class, which was 2 days, and now you are in a big shoes to fill, basically. Like, there has to be something comic happening now and then. I wouldn't believe if out of those 80 people you didn't have a good story.
To be honest, no, there's nothing really coming to my mind right now. I'm really drawing a blank, and I don't think it's because I just don't remember. I don't think there's really. No, now I have a funny story. Now something comes to my mind. So it was. I was giving a trainer in Delft, the Netherlands. PSTs have a tendency to be very vocal, outspoken, and we have some PSTs. You can listen to them for hours without being bored. So they're really good kind of conversationalists. And I was giving a trainer, and I think the number was like I had 3 of those in my group, and I was really afraid of that. If they start talking in the training and the next one, it's like we would slip so behind the schedule that we kind of couldn't cover all the learning objectives, everything which we want to go through by the curriculum. So essentially the day before the training, I just sent out an email to everybody who was a trainer, say, you know what, this is a public class. There are regular folks in the training as well. Now, and maybe my words were too hard, but I really wanted to make the point. I just told them, be quiet, enrich the conversations on the table, but don't hijack any conversations and don't show off how much you know. That's what I'm looking forward. And by the way, this is something I will grade you on. So basically, if you talk too much, it will be reflecting negative on your application. And I just wanted to make a clear statement. And I think I just overdid it because then the next day when we were sitting in the room, everyone who was a trainer candidate, they were like quiet, not at all. And then I just said, okay, maybe they warm up a little bit. So I didn't really think that my email was wrong. And then one guy who was kind of one of the people I was concerned about, he came to me at the first lunch and said, hey, Ralph, is it okay the way we kind of behave right now? And I just say, actually, it's a little bit too quiet for my taste. So, and then it's kind of things change and it become better. But this was still something we smile about and love about once we get together and have a beer.
Now to the next point, you have co-written the Professional Product Owner book together with Don McGrail. I'd like you to walk us through the process of creation of a book. I have only interacted with it once when I was a book reviewer for Jürgen Apollo, and he did his latest book, Startup, Scale Up, Screw Up. So I had the chance to briefly discuss it with him when he came to Kyiv for a conference, and he told that there is essentially 3-step process. The first one is brain puke. When you just lay down everything you know on paper, it might be poorly structured. These are my ideas and I just get them on paper. The next point is that you try to give it a good structure. You at least have to put some blocks in order that would be appealing for a person to read. And the last one is when he sends out the chapters or the whole book for a review, people read it, they make sure the language is crisp and clear in every sentence, and it's the most time consuming one. Is it anything like that? The other general rules and tips for writing the book you could share, or it's a completely different process for you?
So maybe let me first talk a little bit about the history, how this whole book journey started. So I was giving a talk at Scrum Day London in 2006 in May. Dave West was there as well. He's the CEO of Scrum.org now, and he gave the keynote. And after we had both given our talk, we sat down and we chatted a little bit. And out of this conversation, he suddenly looked at me and said, "Hey, Ralph, what we are missing is a really good book about product ownership, how it's supposed to be, how we think about it." At this point, there were two books out there, one from Roman Pichler, which I think is a really good book, but it's too tactical in my opinion, and another one from Robert Galen, which again I thought it's a good book, but in some cases he was explaining product ownership in a way we didn't teach it because it wasn't really in line kind of how Scrum is supposed to be done correctly. There was nothing out there which you said this really fits the way we teach it. Now, essentially it was like a subtle message like, could you write one? I thought about writing a book for some time, and now suddenly you have that, and I just say, not sure how to do that, no experience. That evening I chatted with Don and just said, you know what, would you be up to write a book together that we kind of do it? And it just said, sure, but let me just share an experience because I was trying to write a book with my colleagues at Improving a while ago, the company he's working for, or he's vice president of training, and it never happened. So kind of people take something, they write about it. So they thought about it like everybody writes a chapter and then they put it together, and it never happened. So it wasn't successful. He just said, yes, I'm game, but don't be too confident that it really works out. So just, okay, let's give it a try. I mean, if we don't try, we cannot succeed. So this was then around, probably we started writing in June 2016, maybe July. So then we got together and we just said, okay, what is the rough structure? And then we thought about, okay, these things are important for us, these elements. So we kind of thought about a possible table of contents, essentially. This was pretty much like think about it, a really rough product backlog. Like we had a vision. We want to have a really good book which teaches ownership the way we teach it in our classes, how Scrum.org thinks about what product ownership, a good product owner should be doing. We came up with a definition of done, which is another funny story I can maybe talk about later on. So basically we just say, okay, when is this book done? If it fulfills these and these elements. And one of the elements is we choose one person and then you're always right from that person. That's one of the basic rules if you write a book. You choose either I, you, or whatever, but don't mix them up. And we mixed them up everywhere. So essentially we had to go back at some point and rewrite, kind of go. Sometimes it's just swapping the word. But sometimes you have to rephrase a whole sentence. And if you rephrase one sentence, you have to rephrase the sentences around that sentence because it just cascades all over the place. But essentially, this is how we started off with. And then we met weekly. We put everything into a Google Doc. And then we met via Skype. And then we were kind of not really writing together. So everybody took one topic. And then we wrote about that for about a week. Usually whenever there was something ready, you just send an email, hey, Don, I wrote about this and this and this. So, and the same thing. And then basically I read what he wrote and he read what I wrote. We just gave feedback on it. And then when we got together, we just went through all of that. Think about it like pair programming. I think this is a really good comparison. So essentially it means whatever he wrote and I wrote, we just went then over it together again, and we kind of put it in the words we then both agreed on. That's pretty much how we did it. And I know the first thought is, do we have enough material for a book actually? You're worried about that you end up with 50 pages. I think the book is now 320 pages or something like that. And at some point, actually, we had to cut because we have close to 400 pages. And Now every page is hard work because you write it, you correct it internally, like with my co-author at this point. Then it goes to the editor, and then at some point you have to take something out.
I really like the part where you use the Monte Carlo simulation for
Yeah.
forecasting the estimates and product backlog and how much time would you need to fit it in. To be fair, I tried it with two separate projects. For one, it was just 10 out of 10, bullseye. Instantly, I was absolutely happy that I did it, and I tried it with the next project, and it just failed tremendously because I don't even know why, but it just didn't work for that part. That I didn't ever try it again, to my shame, but at least I know it works for some cases.
Okay. Yeah. So no, but this is how we started off with, and essentially this is what we did kind of through the course of close to 2 years. In the meantime, also kind of halfway through, Don became a father. So I think kind of having a co-author is a really good thing because you have somebody to run ideas by, or something you wrote, not just an editor, because an editor, they're really good with words, good sentences, and that it reads smooth, but you could still write something which might be a little bit off here and there. But doing it with a co-author, a partner, it's kind of like you might write something, hey, I have an idea, I think we should kind of, and then you just get feedback, and this is really powerful. And also sometimes you just get stuck. When Don became a father, suddenly he didn't have time anymore, so I just carried on for a couple of months, and then he came back, and it makes it easier because you can cheer up yourself as well. Just to say, you know what, we've been stuck so long, let's do a call next week again, and let's move on. And at some point, I think this was April 2017, or no, February 2017. Actually, we're kind of stalled somehow. We were at a point where it didn't really work out anymore. And I just, you know what, Don, let's do it this way. I'll come to your place. He's based in Dallas, Texas, for a week, and let's just really put our teeth in there, and let's go through that. And so he agreed, but he also had a training that week in the Bay Area, in Redwood City. I landed on a Sunday, and he picked me up at the airport, and then we went to my hotel, and we sat down at the bar, and we came up with this plan: every day a chapter, and we should be done next Saturday, and then I fly back, and everything is good in order again. And so far so good. Talking about plans, on Wednesday we went through with chapter 1, way behind. It was really interesting because we kind of every day we went to his office, we booked a room, we put a projector on, so basically we typed together through Google Docs. We used the whiteboards to lay out our thoughts and all of these things. And then when we flew from Dallas to San Francisco, we were on different planes because we collect different miles with different airlines anyway. So we agreed on who's working or what in the plane, and then we landed, and then we went to Starbucks, and then we taught. In the evening we went kind of to the restaurant, and then there again we took a kind of, it was work and the book kind of intensively for those 7 days. But after that, we only think we completed 2 chapters out of the 7 or something we had in mind by then. But we were really kind of back on track with what we really wanted to talk about, to really have kind of the message. And maybe that's something you mentioned with the Jürgen Appelo process, that at some point you have to maybe throw something out and rework something. And I think this was a major milestone in that regard, that we just realized some things we shouldn't write about and some things we should write about. And then basically we kept on doing that until autumn. I think it was August, September that year. And then the whole publisher editing process starts, which takes long.
So overall, it was about 2 years for you to come up with
About,
320
something like
pages.
that, yeah.
And did the scheduling of let's do consistent amount of work each week, did it help, or did it derail? Because still life happens and you have other things and responsibilities to take care. I guess the book was high on your priority list, but anytime, I don't know, a training comes or something happens in a family or something in your household, it trumps the book at any given point.
Yes, but even if something else happens and it trumps writing the book, you still have to get back to it. And I think this is something, if you're really committed, you just make it happen. And I was in situations like that. I didn't know how to put this down. I didn't know how to write that. But then maybe when I was walking my dog, I thought about it. Suddenly, but hey, in this, I think we should talk about something else. Kind of, it was maybe a completely different chapter, completely different area, but suddenly I had an idea about what. So basically, I just went back, went into the document again, and I opened a new chapter and I started typing something down there. So the message I want to convey here is that it's my experience is, I would say, it's more important to make progress than be perfect. Because once you have material, you can always take something out, remove things, and change something. But if you have nothing, you have nothing to work with. So it's kind of like just bringing things down. And again, this is where the peer review process comes into the picture. Because maybe we met next week and just say, Don, I was stuck here. I didn't have any ideas, but I wrote about that. Can we look into this and so as well? And then over time, you grow the skeleton, and then slowly bits and pieces they merge together. Basically, you put the muscles in between two bones, and then you get a cohesive picture over time. Once we had a couple of chapters completed, or even we gave access to some of our trusted PhDs, we knew just, what, would you be willing to read what we have put down so far? And we got good feedback here and there. What the interesting thing is, everybody read the book sequential. So like for the first 50 pages, we had tons of feedback, and then suddenly it starts to thin out. So for the last pages, or what we had kind of towards the end, there wasn't too much feedback. But yes, but it is a commitment. I think if you're not really committed to do that, the chances of that it just kind of gets pushed back further and further by real life events is too high, and then it will never happen. If I was to write another book, I probably, if I would have the option, I would also try to do it with a co-author, because this is just like you have a shoulder to lean on hard days.
Is there something we should expect in the upcoming time? Do you have any concrete plans?
Nothing is in the working. There's nothing I could talk about. It's just that I'm following through on some couple ideas right now. I'm reading some books, and I think about how they could be used and something like that. Maybe there's a white paper coming along at Scrum.org at some point, but otherwise, no, there's no book in the making.
Being the person with so much experience in training and coaching and consulting, what tips would you give to people who are just starting their career and being the product owners? What are the most important things they have to keep in mind, and what, on the other hand, what are the frequently made mistakes that they can try to avoid?
Well, it just kind of goes also kind of strong back to our book, and in there we came up with a term we call the product management vacuum. What we usually see in organizations is that there's a really strong understanding strategically for what is needed to be done. So the way I like to talk about it, so the head knows where it wants to go, and the people doing the work on a tactical level, they would know how to get there, but in between there's this disconnect. And this is what we like to refer to as the product management vacuum. And the problem is, and this is probably what most product owners are faced with, is that pretty much all the companies these days are still thinking in projects, not in products. Now, the really interesting thing is in Scrum is we have a product owner, not a project owner. Because over 25 years ago, Ken and Jeff said, no, we have to think in products. And this is really a game changer. But now going out of this project mindset into a product mindset, this is really invasive for existing company structures, hierarchies, and reporting structures, and all of these things. But this is kind of, and if you're not careful, because in the project mindset, you have your milestones, you have your reports, you have your plans, all of that. And essentially, once you get out of this vacuum, you hope to be pretty much in the right place. It's like a submarine diving down and coming up after half a year and hoping you are where you're supposed to be. Everything we can do while we're in the vacuum is kind of adhere to process compliance. to measure. Yes, we are on the time. We're on time, on scope and budget. We're on time, on scope and budget. We are still following the plan end to end. But does it really mean you will have the right outcome? You will produce value for your end user. And this is the problem most product owners are facing. And what we're looking for is essentially, or what we consider a product owner is for us a product manager who thinks and acts and is entrepreneurial with an agile mindset. And far too often, product owners are under. There's a product manager often, which is kind of, most companies think about this way. So there's a product manager up there. We need this, a very good strategic thinking. Down there, the product owner is the person, you get it done on a tactical level. But in between, we have then this vacuum again. The product owner doesn't really understand the strategy which is being followed. The product manager doesn't really understand, appreciate the technical and other problems on the tactical level. And again, this is kind of this reinforcement. Now, what we consider is that product ownership is like a slice through all of those layers. So that means as a product owner, you should be anchored high enough in the company to have at least a chance to really understand why what you're doing is important, how this will help the company, or how this will help or should help an end user solve a problem. Because we think that every product solves a problem for a user. So which problems are you solving for whom? And once you have understood that, you can act on it much more autonomously, which is kind of another important aspect. So this is what I see most product owners being facing with. And we have one exercise or one slide where we just say kind of the growth curve of a product owner. So scribe means you might be the person just typing in requirements as user stories into Jira. You're really good at typing. And this is what often happens while I'm supposed to write the user stories. This is kind of not right on so many levels, because you're not owning the product. You're being told what to do. And by just typing it into Jira, you're more like an administrator. And then the next one would be a proxy. As a proxy, you go out and you talk to your customers. You collect the data. You tell us you're the developers, do this. And then they will ask questions which you cannot clarify. So you go forward and backward. You're a proxy product owner. And the next step up is that you should have, as a product owner, domain understanding, because you need to understand the domain for the people for whom you're solving a problem. And this is kind of a business representative. And this is really a big leap forward, because now you start to own the experience solutions for that product. But then still often you're constrained by the budgeting process which exists in companies, because companies usually sponsor projects. Going through a sponsoring process, getting a budget, is a really tedious thing to do. So you don't do it for small things, you do it for big things. Now, big projects have the tendency to grow, to take longer than planned. Now, this is a really long endeavor. And then basically, this is where this whole milestone vacuum filling thinking comes in. We know that a product owner should be able to, and they're different. There's beyond budgeting thinkings, rolling budgets, capability budgeting, and so on. There's answers out there already. But now, as a good product owner, maybe you can talk to the right people and get the budgeting process slightly changed for your advantage, for the customer's product advantage, essentially. And at the end, we have this entrepreneurial mindset, essentially. And this is, most people realize once we talk about that they're somewhere probably in the middle, maybe a little bit more on the left-hand side towards scribe and proxy. And this is often eye-opening. And then you ask them, I know this is now eye-opening, maybe even frustrating. Now the next question should be, what could you do to move towards the right? What skills should you have? What understanding could you acquire in order to move more towards the right?
So let's say I'm a guy who has joined, and I have realized after half year working and professional Scrum training that I'm really a proxy, and there is a guy on, I don't know, a guy on the business side that's making all the decisions and doing all the budgeting and setting the priorities, but he doesn't have time for interacting with the team and dealing with small tactical things in his field of view, and it may be perfectly appropriate. So how do I convince, I don't know, him or people above him that, hey, I'm worth being in the position to have more responsibility and more power?
Oh, this is a, this is a really multifaceted, multi-layered question. There's so much attached to that. So it's probably, we can talk about it for a day at least. So I usually think is that the way I think about it is totally decoupled from being a product owner. It's like when you get promoted in a company, and you get promoted in a company when you do the work which is the level above, and you show how to do that. Essentially, by showing that, hey, I'm capable of doing this and this work, and the outcomes are good, the results are fine. So and then suddenly, yeah, you get nudged up, and then kind of you do the same thing again. You don't get, sometimes it happens, but it's probably not a good thing to do, but you don't get promoted, hey, now you're doing this, good luck, because this is probably a recipe for disaster. And for me, that's the same thing for product owners. They need to maybe take the courage, which is also one of the Scrum values, to kind of do the right thing, maybe on their own, maybe even on their own time to some degree, maybe taking some risks here and there, but show the benefit to someone who is in charge. And once they do that, they get recognized. And just, what, isn't that good? And say, yeah, sure, this looks nice. I could do a little bit more. How about you give me the possibility to do this and this and this on top of what I'm currently allowed to do? And often the answer is yes. And then you inch a little bit forward, and then kind of you keep on just doing that. And eventually you end up at the place where you want to be.
Yeah, that's a good tip of advice. Maybe to be fair, I just highlight that in order for all of this to happen, your bosses and organizations should also have an agile mindset and understand that promotion has to happen based on the skills, and they should be enabling it to happen, not stalling. I've seen people, and I've been to the trainings and events and the networking. It's different per company, and somewhere where the management just doesn't understand that you should promote the people who work hard and get good results. But there is some old mentality about how promotion should look like. It really cripples down on people and their spirit, and they tend to just leave as there is no better option. So it has, the stars have to align for everything to happen. But of course, you are completely right to point out that it has to start with you and your courage to make the next step that you haven't made before.
Yes, I know, and there's politics, there's so many other things, and even if a company really is dedicated, there's so much inertia within an existing company, hierarchies, power plays, and things like that. So depending on company size, it can be a really daunting challenge. And I know sometimes, I know from people who have been successful in doing that, but I also know from others who weren't, and they really get frustrated at some point. And then sometimes I get an email from them, hey, you know what, I'm stuck here. If you have any ideas, another company looking for a good product owner in these areas, I would be really appreciating it if you remember me. And in English, there's the sentence, you can change the company or you can change the company.
Yeah, indeed. Good way to sum it up. And one brief question before we go to the closure, just 2 or 3 typical mistakes that new coming product owners usually do. I can start off and share mine. Probably biggest one that I've had was that I could not say no, because the person who was asking me to make something happen in the product was too important, a position of authority. So I just, in the beginning, tended to say yes to everything. And of course, it backfired horribly with expectations not being met, backlog growing exponentially, and people being unhappy. So once you can articulate a no with some arguments for why it is a no, or it is not yet, but let's wait, or something else, people feel that you are really in a driving seat and you know the product best, and they tend to agree with you. And I hope you can add on top of it a couple of more things.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what you just said, I think this is where I usually ask always the question, So you want this feature. So how does this help us? And this is where a good vision is really powerful. How does this help us with our vision we are currently helping? And if they can explain that, you say, okay, yeah, looks good. Let's talk about a little bit more. We need to figure out some more details, but yeah. But if the answer is like, not sure, not really, just say, you know what, I think it's a good idea, but it doesn't fit into our vision right now, so we shouldn't be doing it. So, and before you give it over to me, please keep it. Now come back maybe in half a year, whenever you think it's the right moment to bring it up again. I'd rather have it with you than being put into a product backlog when it just disappears in there, because it just is this endless growing list of things. This is kind of one of the elements I like to use there with having a good product vision, which is also one of the things is that I think too many places are just busy. Oh, we need to do something, and then I get on it and I do something. But why are you doing it? Why are you doing all of that? Why are you spending all of the money? What's the underlying idea? What do you want to achieve? What's your goal? And this is good. So kind of vision is always important, and it still is. But now through the new Scrum Guide, we also have this concept of a product goal, which is a lot more like an intermediary step towards the vision. It's larger than a sprint goal, smaller than the vision, somewhere in between there, and you can make it work for your benefit. And I far too often, again, this goes back to this project mindset. Oh, we have this project, we have to do something, and there's something we have to do over there, and then you measure your how many features are completed, percentage, and stuff like that. This, I think, one of the biggest problems I see of this is falling back into this project mindset, not having a clear vision. I've been to companies, multi-million-dollar projects, where we started off after 3 days. We just came together, we came up with our vision, we came up with our first initial mission, which we could now call a product goal. This was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Monday we started our first sprint, which worked great. Was really successful. Now, if you think about that from a classical point of view, would you get something like that regularly approved? So now we have now there 8 people working for the next 8 months, costing us quite a bunch. Is that okay? Now, in this case, people knew there was a sense of urgency, all of this. So yes, it happened. But in a classical environment, it's like, no, you have to show the calculations, the business plan, this and this and this. And then it goes forward and backwards until you get the sign off, you get the money. And then this whole classical budgeting process happens and so on. So kind of all the problems. But this is not this is kind of a common problem. This is not really a mistake I see. But maybe one of the other kind of not saying no often enough, because every time you say yes, you have to say no to something else. Now, this is always something I always tell people, keep that in mind. If you just say yes, you have to say no to something else. What should that be? So think about the trade-off, which is also one of the important aspects. I think it's really important these days, if you think in product development, is cost of delay. What is the cost of delay? You say not yet. What is the cost of delay? Not too many companies really kind of think along that way, because if you really do some calculations around your cost of delay, you have hard numbers giving you the facts, telling you pretty much what you should be doing. One of the other things I often see is that people think too technical often, because sometimes I have product owners which are coming more from a technical background, and they think far too much in technical solutions than in customer happiness. I think this is kind of how I would summarize that.
One thing I'll just throw on top of it, because it just came to mind. It feels that you as a product owner are doing a good job if you are not buried in one field only. From what I have spoken with my colleagues and just from my experiences, as a product owner, you pointed out that you have many slices where you have to dig in. So there is sales, marketing, competition on the market. You work with the team, you work with stakeholders and shareholders, maybe some C-level management. You are interested in technical capabilities. You want to catch wind of new technology and understand how you need to utilize them. So if you're doing a bit of everything at the same time and it's happening constantly, then probably you're doing things fine. So things are in order. if you tend to find time for all these small things that are valuable as a product owner, it's a good indication that you are doing a good job. Because
Yes, and I totally agree in that regard. And I think it's really important that you have good developers as a product owner, which you can trust. And once you have, because you are accountable for the product, but responsibility can and should be delegated, because if you don't delegate that, you can't do all the work good enough. If you can really trust your developers, they can maybe, don't tell them what they need to do. Just tell them, this is a problem I currently have. Please find an answer for that.
thank you very much, Ralph, for coming, for being here. It was a joyful conversation. I guess it could go on for hours, but as it's Saturday and we have things to do and we'll be closing on here. Any announcements to make? What's coming on your radar in the next weeks?
So the short term, so end of January, don't let me lie, let me just look it up right now. I think it's January 31st. Yes, it is. I'm talking at Beyond Agile Israel. It's an online conference. I think the registration fee is €5. They have Joe Justice as a talker and some other kind of great names there as well. I'll talk about what it means to be a good product owner. I talk a lot about the product management vacuum I had mentioned in this conversation. So maybe if you're interested in that, you can, maybe it's before the conference is before this podcast is out there. But anyway, this is kind of maybe short term. But otherwise, I hope I might see you on one of my trainings in person or virtual.